You may have heard about Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon. Why was it such a big thing, and what was it exactly? In 49 BCE, sometime in January, around the 10th, is usually cited, Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon River. This marked the southern boundary of Cisalpine Gaul, which is a modern-day northern Italy and is a province that Julius Caesar was in charge of. But by crossing the Rubicon with an army, Caesar was acting outside of his authority. And this also was in the space of a political crisis which had been going on between Caesar and the Roman Senate. They'd have been at loggerheads for a long time, and so by Caesar crossing the Rubicon with an army, he was effectively declaring war on the Senate, and thus began the Civil War. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, two sources say that he said a particular line which has become quite famous now. Suetonius, the die is cast, and Plutarch, let the die be cast. Well, just to clear it up, the former, that is to say Suetonius, is probably a bit of a mistranslation because the original line was from a Greek playwright, this guy, Menander. And the line that he had in Greek went along the lines of Anaryptho Kaibos, let the die be cast. Now, I should just add, as a caveat, I'm not a classicist in that I don't have training in Latin or Greek. My background is ancient history. And perhaps linguistics aside, the more interesting aspect to it is let the die be cast was a popular phrase at the time. Plutarch states that people used it generally when you were doing something risky or hazardous, which, let's face it, Caesar was definitely doing with his army going south. And Plutarch also mentions that it was possibly said in Greek. Anyway, I think that says a lot about Caesar, if it happened, that he was speaking to his troops with a phrase or a term or whatever you want to call it, that they would have understood. So what do you think links crossing the Rubicon, a ghost, and music? Well, that'll be Suetonius. Along with Plutarch, Suetonius wrote of how Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon and really pondered over his decision. It had huge implications for him personally and just about everyone else. But Suetonius added a bit extra which suggested how Julius Caesar made his decision. As he stood in two minds, an apparition of superhuman size and beauty was seen sitting on the riverbank playing a reed pipe. A party of shepherds gathered around to listen, and when some of Caesar's men, including some of the trumpeters, broke ranks to do the same, the apparition snatched a trumpet from one of them, ran down to the river, blew a thunderous blast and crossed over. Now, the apparition was presumably a bit of a narrative device on Suetonius' part because it kind of heightens the drama to it all and also shows that such a big event needed that kind of divine hand, or at least some sort of portent. But I'm also interested, perhaps more so, in the role of the shepherds on all of this. You've got to remember that the shepherds were used in some of the foundation myth of Rome, and later they're sort of there and thereabouts when the big stuff sort of happens. Romulus and Remus were discovered by a shepherd and became shepherds, and it was also the shepherds who helped Romulus and Remus avenge their grandfather and thus set in motion the events that led to their falling out and the foundation of Rome. And I kind of wonder if the whole point to the shepherds here was that it hinted at that new foundation. Here's a group who were involved in the previous foundation of Rome, again, somehow being involved in events leading up to a new foundation of Rome.